Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt, that fine gentleman over there, back from sunny Southern California. We took the day off, Dan, for the 4th of July.
I know we did. Yep.
You flew back to your studio in Chicago on the 4th of July. We are back now recording this on July the 6th. Sir, how are you?
I'm great, Ty. I spent a lot of time in the water out west, hurling my kids to and fro. Could not recommend it more. And so, as I like to do here, Ty, I'm building the whole podcast audio plane out of the idea of creating splashes, Ty. Yeah. It's July, and we happen to be recording this on July 5th, and so we'll get into that momentarily, Ty. But we have a number of teams. We have the concept of splashes, 7-5, of course, July 5th. So here I am, Ty. Maybe a little tanner, maybe a little more energized.
I see, you got a little color. I like it.
I feel good, Ty. I do.
Excellent. Yeah, I misspoke. We are recording this on July the 5th. Many of you, most of you are probably listening to this on July the 6th. For those who are members over at verballers.com, verballers.com, you, of course, get access to this episode early. I did want to kind of throw up the bat signal, the solid verbal signal, the verballer signal. We don't have one of those yet. We don't have the budget for it. But we have all sorts of new, fun, and exciting things coming to Patreon. We took a poll a couple months back, and it seems as if folks would be very, very happy and confident in their purchase if we sort of built the whole plane out of really good bonus stuff. Bonus content. So we've got more of that coming to Patreon over the next coming weeks and months, obviously, as we get into the season. More bonus, more exclusive access, more perks that we're excited to take the bubble wrap off of. So we've been working really hard here behind the scenes trying to make that as good as it can be. More games. I've kind of alluded to the game that we're going to be doing, kind of the preseason game before Run the Board, which of course we will continue to do. So just going out to verballers.com and check it out. Familiarize yourself with the two tiers that we have, the certified and premium tiers. We are going to be ramping things up on the Patreon front here in very, very short order. We're excited about it. Of course, it's kind of like the first step as we get into the new season. So verballers.com, one more time, go and check that out. Make sure you follow along on social media as well as YouTube. Dan.
I have nothing to add, Ty. I have nothing to add except for excitement getting into this game.
So as you mentioned, we're recording this on July the 5th. Many folks will listen to this on July the 6th. However, there are a bunch of teams last year that went 7-5. There actually were a handful of teams that went 7-6 as well, but 7-5 is our concept here.
Regular season 7-5.
Regular season 7-5.
Yeah.
We put our heads together, and as you said, you're kind of enamored with this idea of pools.
Mm-hmm.
And so where did we land on today's concept?
So as you know, the name of the show, if you decide to put this in the title, Ty, I don't know where you're going to be here with your data entry, but flex or flop, okay?
That's right.
So a number of teams, and I think we should come to define what we view as a 7-5 team, a 7-5 program, what that generally means. Because we talked about this when we talked about the 8-win or 10-win aspirational teams. Like if you're an 8-win program, what does that mean you're doing? Or perhaps not doing if you could be doing more. Or if you're a 10-win program, what are you doing right that you weren't doing as an 8 or 9-win type annual program? So to me, 7-5, if you are a 7-5 program, which means that you are going to win between 6 and 8 games each season, that means there are going to be 2 or 3 games that are going to go either way that perhaps you are going to lose. You have to be good enough to be a bowl team, but not good enough to close out winnable games all the time. Like there is something in your way with a fourth quarter lead, or you're playing in an advantageous situation. In terms of one of these teams, it was a team playing at home, losing close to a backup quarterback. You can't do that if you're going to be an 8-win, 9-win type program, right? Those are the games that you have to check off the board. And so that's where I fall with a 7-5 win team. There is a high floor, usually, that says we're a bowl eligible team. We do something probably pretty well, but also when it comes to perhaps the other side of the ball, or perhaps when it comes to one-score games or holding on to a late lead, perhaps we don't do that as well. That this is not a team able to take advantage of the opportunity truck, that they're drafting behind the opportunity truck and they can't quite pick off the DVD players that fall off, or whatever it is of value that falls off. And so, sure, there are going to be 4 or 5 win type programs that have that crazy up year to get to 7-5. That's great. And we can talk about that if one of these teams that we're going to mention fits the bill. But we have a series of 6 teams here that we're going to talk about why it is that they have gone 7-5 recently, and do we define them as this? Do we define them as lesser? Do we define them as more moving forward? And so the name of our game is Flex.
I remember you. Oh, sexy.
Or Flop. That's just a generic belly flop sound that I happen to find, and there's only one way to react to a particularly pronounced belly flop, and that's
Have you done it? When was the last time you did a belly flop? How many years ago?
20 plus intentionally, probably fewer than that unintentionally, trying to do some kind of flip or trying to show belly flop into a dive kind of thing.
Yeah.
I always enjoy watching it. I always enjoy, as long as I know somebody doesn't get seriously hurt, where somebody tries to jump off of a cliff or a platform dive that is traditionally able to do what they're intending to do, and then it goes haywire. I enjoy that immensely.
I believe I was tipsy and did a belly flop into a pool in Jamaica on my honeymoon in 2015.
Tipsy honeymoon flop.
Yeah. I think that
just
was the last one I
impress your
remember.
bride. Was it just to impress solid wife Kate?
I think it was probably to make her roll her eyes. Yeah.
Oh, what a night that must have been, right?
Crazy. Can't even talk about it on the air. No,
absolutely not. So yeah, we're playing Flex or Flop. So Flex being, if we're going to define a team as being, yeah, they recently went 7-5, but we see more upside than not to do better more often than not. Flop being, yeah, they can win 7 when things go right, but maybe they're more 5 or 6-ish wins.
Sure.
On an average season, given circumstances, given schedule, given how they're recruiting, given what the coaching staff has done recently, whatever the reason. So we're going Flex or Flop, or I don't know if there's something, I think it's kind of a cop-out to say like, oh, pencil dive or whatever, where they're just jumping in, everything is fine, but nothing spectacular. I think we got to go one direction or the other.
That's fine. So the 6 teams that we picked out Washington State, Kentucky, Houston, and then 3 ACC teams. I've got the ACC contingent here on today's show. Syracuse, Louisville, and Wake Forest.
What's more 7-5-ish than the Atlantic Coast Conference?
As you were kind of giving that description, Wake Forest kept coming to mind. Maybe I can start with Wake Forest.
Sure.
I think I'm in the flex camp, if you want to play the flex for me.
I remember you. Oh, sexy.
Yeah, I mean, I think often about your rubric when it comes to which teams are going to be successful throughout the course of the season. And your rubric is very simple. It's quarterback and defense.
That's more for the playoff-ish teams.
More for the playoff, but I think there is some validity to it across the board.
Any team would be well served to combine strong quarterback play and strong defense, especially up front. Yeah.
And Wake Forest hasn't really had a culmination of both all that often. They've had Sam Hartman the last couple seasons, and that has helped. And I think what we've seen from the coaching staff and Dave Clawson is that if they've got that difference maker, they can turn that into winning seasons. My problem for the short term is that I don't know if they have either. I don't know if I believe in Mitch Griffiths, their presumed starting quarterback. I certainly don't believe in the defense. They've got some dudes. They've got a promising defensive coordinator. But there's just not a track record on defense that I could really believe in there. So that part for me is missing in the short term. Where I think I'm a little bit more inclined to flex here with Wake Forest is because of Dave Clawson. He's been there for a while now. He's kind of figured it out. He's been to a bowl game 5 of the last 6 seasons. And it seems like he's not out there to win the conference. Everybody wants to do that. But to remain competitive, to get the bowl games, he's at least got them to that standard. Which if you're a Wake fan, that's something that I think you got to feel pretty good about. This year, again, another bit of headwind that they're going to have to deal with is that the schedule's brutal. The schedule's really difficult. The road games are are a real challenge. When we did our schedule preview, I think the over-under was 5.5. Now it's bumped up to 6.5. I might consider going under on that one.
Right.
But all this to say that I think I flex, if only because I have a lot of confidence in Dave Clawson. And I think Wake is a nice program. I think he has built them to a point of stability. And provided he can keep that program flush with talent, he's going to be able to coach his way to 7 wins more often than not. Maybe not this year, but more often than not, if that is our standard in the 7-5 game, getting back to that 7-win plateau.
Right.
I think he's a good enough coach, a far, talented enough coach to get there on a recurring basis.
Yeah. So they're a quintessential. They're a pain in the ass team.
Yep.
And I think they might be the lone pain in the ass team in the ACC because of a specific style of play. Now that Paul Johnson's been gone from Georgia Tech for a few years. The big deal with Wake is the shootout factor, right? That because their offense is so good and can put up points on basically anybody. We saw it against Clemson last year. And because their defense is still so turnstile that they are the quintessential team that needs to win. I mean, USC was here last year, but they won 11 games a couple years ago now, going back to 2021.
Yep.
Before that, Wake Forest was a 7-ish win program. So if you are gambling on a 7-win floor, the upside flex for Wake Forest, you're saying to yourself, they've got to get a little bit more out of the defense eventually, right? That if you look at the ACC, it seems to be only getting better offensively, that teams that really did struggle have made changes and it seems to be more upside. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a lot of these teams can do both at the same time.
That's the problem.
So you're still looking at Wake Forest, and I agree with you that the Dave Clawson factor should be the difference maker, but it also is, Wake does feel like a team that has to strike at the middle of the Venn diagram between, all right, we've got offensive playmakers, our defense is a liability, but we're well coached and we can take advantage of down teams, especially when we have a bunch of like 5th-year seniors. So I think you need to just have that faith in Dave Clawson that every successive quarterback is going to be well developed to the point where they're going to win 3 of 4 of those shootout type situations. Because what did they lost 4 of 5 last year down the stretch at a certain point, I think in the back half of the season. So maybe that's an anomaly. Maybe Sam Hartman was having issues. We saw a couple of crazy games from him in not a good way. So I don't hate that because Wake Forest has become the sort of steady Eddie. Like you fully know what you're getting with Wake, and when you look around the conference, there are teams bombing out, there are teams improving, and Wake is Wake.
Yeah. I mean, the telling stat to the point of defense, I saw this and I'm trying to recap from memory.
Okay.
Something like in their losses over the last 5 years, they've given up an average of 44 points.
Right, exactly.
And, that sets such a high bar for your offense if you want to win. If every close game is a shootout, every game against a reasonable offense is a shootout, you really have no margin for error. And so I actually think they could get better this year on defense. I think they've got enough talent that, they can organize this thing in a way that gets them better results. So I feel optimistic about that side of the ball. I'm actually not sure what to make of their offense because I'm just not a Mitch Griffiths believer at this stage in early July, whenever we're recording this. So I think long-term, I'm probably a flex. Short-term, though, 2023 is going to be a challenge. It's a tough schedule.
Just stand by your flex. Stand by your flex. And the big thing with Wake, at least last year, if I'm defining this as the upside 7+, is you can't lose more than 2 winnable games.
That's right.
You just can't. And so when you look at last year's Wake team, it's losing a winnable game to Duke, losing a winnable game to North Carolina, losing a winnable game to Clemson. That's the difference when you look at the back and forth nature of those games. That's that third game where you're just like, that's the difference, right? That you have to be able to close out 2 of 3. And they just weren't in those situations.
Talk to me about Washington State, Dan.
Washington State's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm glad we've got Wazoo on this list because in all of the preseason work that we've done here and all throughout the offseason, I don't feel like we've talked enough about Washington State. We've talked a lot about other teams in the Pac-12 North, quadrant, right? Of course,
Sure.
Washington and Oregon, Stanford's got a new coach, and Oregon State's got DJU, and even Cal's got some intro. Like, there's a lot to talk about, but we have, by and large, kind of looked over Wazoo. Where's Wazoo at here on this flex flop scale for you?
So last year they go 7-5 during the regular season, have an impressive win against Wisconsin in Madison.
Yep.
They are probably a really well-coached team because the talent level in Wazoo, especially given the tumultuous nature of where Washington State's been these past few years, with Mike Leach leaving, with Nick Rolovich coming and going, and that's off-field stuff because obviously Washington State showed promise, especially on offense, under Nick Rolovich. Jake Dickert comes in. The defense is pretty good last year. It really is pretty good. That's the strength of the team.
Very good.
You were infatuated with Cameron Ward, and he's back. Went to the Manning Passing Academy, Ty. I don't know what that means to you, but turns some heads.
Yeah.
The Manning Passing.
Every
quarterback turns heads at the Manning Passing
Always.
Academy.
They all do.
Look, it's a ton of turnover in the coaching staff. It's a ton of turnover in the portal. And if there's any team that has been incredibly fun and meaningful to watch in college football over these past 10 years or so, that is in danger of just falling completely off the map because of realignment, it's probably Washington State, even more so than Oregon State, because Oregon State has made waves recently. Jonathan Smith, I think, is regarded as probably one of the 15 or 20 best coaches, especially given talent level in the sport. And Washington State hasn't recruited. They haven't been especially impressive overall in the portal with what's gone out versus what has come in. And as a program right now, given talent level, given what looms over the program with realignment, I'm leaning flop. And I'm leaning flop saying, I think Jake Dickert's a really good coach, but there are certain things that point to, I think they had like very clearly the worst recruiting class in the Pac-12 this past year. Yeah. If you look at like the average recruiting recruit rating from 24/7 to whatever extent you believe in such things. And so there are a number of underlying things about Washington State that good coaching, which I believe they have in Jake Dickert, can only take you so far. And so their schedule is fine, but they're, I think, one of those programs that you want your winnable games at home. And they have a lot of, like, it's fine this year, but when you project out where the Cougars are overall, I think 7 feels like more of a flex than a flop. So I guess I'm going flop with this. Because I worry about what the roster makeup is going to look like, how easy it will be to recruit against Washington State moving forward. And if Jake Dickert continues to win 7 games at Washington State, somebody's just going to hire him, right? Somebody's like, that is a program that is everybody knows how difficult it is there. And so I think the defense in the short term, especially along the edge, will be good. I think Cam Ward will be better this year. He was up and down. They lost to Utah. I think it was a Bryson Barnes game. If you remember, there was some West Coast scuttlebutt. Like, why isn't anybody saying Cam Rising status before the game? Bryson Barnes starts. Utah isn't especially impressive, and Washington State still loses starting Cam Ward. And that, to me, is emblematic. Now, they're up 12 against Oregon in the fourth quarter, but that was kind of a weird, freaky game with Oregon's miscues in the red zone, and they storm back in the fourth quarter and win that game. You got to hold on at home up 12 against a good team if you want to be an 8-win type program. But otherwise, I think Washington State is just, they're good on the sideline. They recruit to their system pretty well. And ultimately, I just don't think they're going to have the depth and the continuity to have 8 or 9 win seasons as often as 7 win seasons. And so for that, I'm saying flop, though all the same impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Wazoo, I think just in the short term, 2023 will be a really interesting test for the health of that program, because when we did our schedule preview a couple weeks, months ago now, whenever it was, the good news was no USC or Utah, which always helps. But the bad news is that the rest of the schedule kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And it is the kind of schedule that feels like they have 8 road games. Because of the way that this is laid out, there are only 6 of them on the schedule, as most have, but they've got just 3 home games through all of October and November. And one of their home games is in September against New Look, Wisconsin. That's got like a crazy 9-win over
in Pullman, but yeah.
In Pullman. But, after week 5, as you start getting into October, they're at UCLA, they're at Oregon, they're at Arizona State, at Washington later in the year. It gets really difficult here. And what this team is made of, I think in 2023, maybe will give us some indication for what it looks like, the longer term vision for Jake Dickert, should he remain there for any extended period of time. How he handles this murderer's row, wounders row of games that we've got from October on will be really, really interesting. So I think I agree with you. One of the side effects, if you will, of the current state of college football, where everything is very much driven by money and portal and NIL and that type of thing, teams like Wazoo get squeezed out.
Yeah.
And it's only by the hand of a really solid administration, by a really solid coach, that you can kind of counteract some of those effects. Wazoo, the last time I checked, the last time we talked about Wazoo, I believe the athletic program is over budget due to overpayments from the Pac-12.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all these competing forces, I think it puts Wazoo into a bit of a corner. Not the least of which is the school kind of is in a corner, just geographically speaking. It's weird to get to Pullman and play there.
Sure.
So I think I agree with you on the flop thing. I don't want that to be the case, but I'd probably feel more confident saying flop than flex.
Yeah. And look, you look at their schedule this year in the short term, they could start out 5-1, 6-0, or whatever it is before they play against Oregon. There's not a ton on that schedule that's immediately scary. And if you're going to play the flexy,
I remember you. Oh, sexy.
devil's advocate with the Cougs, you're losing 2 losable games. Losing 2 losable games in USC and UCLA moving forward.
That's right.
That's one side of the coin. The flip side of the coin is Herm Edwards isn't coaching ASU anymore. Jimmy Lake isn't coaching Washington anymore. Gary Anderson isn't coaching Oregon State anymore. And the floor of the Pac-12, especially with where Washington appears to be heading, with where Oregon is heading, or appears to be heading as well, Oregon State seems to have arrived. So some of those, you look at Oregon State, Arizona's improved, Colorado is who knows, but right now in the short to short medium term, the floor is being raised in the conference, even with USC and UCLA out, that these schools are quick to not wait around for improvement that's clearly not coming. And so, yes, Gary Anderson, Jimmy Lake, Herm Edwards era teams were nice, soft land. Carl Durrell,
oh man,
they're gone.
Yeah, they're gone.
So that's bad news for Washington State to me, that we might be heading towards a more ACC-ish Pac-12 moving forward, where there's 1 or 2 teams at the top and then just a mess of teams sitting at 5-7, 6-6, 7-5.
All right, give me a flex. Give me a flex for Louisville.
You. Oh, sexy.
Yeah, let's flex for Louisville, Dan. Over-under is 8.5 this year.
Yeah.
I started digging into Louisville just this past week.
Okay.
As part of kind of the normal preseason cycle of trying to relearn teams and figure out who we like and don't like. I am starting to really talk myself into Louisville this season and probably beyond for a handful of reasons, most of which I will go into when we do the actual preview. I don't want to give too much of the game away because I have a lot to say on Louisville. But I think the biggest reason that I'm a flex is the job that Jeff Brom did at Purdue, and knowing that he is coming back to a place that he is familiar with, knowing that if he can bring any semblance of that magic with him from West Lafayette, Louisville will be in a better spot than it was last year under Scott Satterfield. Bear in mind, this was not a horrible team last year under Satterfield. It was an inconsistent team. It was a team that lost 2 games by a combined 5 points to, Florida State and Boston College. This was like an 8-5 team after the bowl that very easily could have had more wins.
Sure.
So it wasn't a bad team, and there's still talent on the roster. What I like about what Brom has done very quickly is he brought in 25 transfers. Whereas Satterfield was, I think, a little bit more reserved in the portal, Jeff Brom hit the ground running, and he brought a bunch of guys in. Now, bringing new guys in does not mean all of them are going to materialize. Doesn't mean they're all going to be good. Jack Plummer could stink at quarterback. I don't know.
I don't like that.
I don't know if I like it either, but I appreciate at least the attention to detail here in, hey, we got to get depth on this roster. And so Plummer might not work out, but Stephen Herron from Stanford, the defensive end, he could help bolster the defense. Storm Duck, the corner who transferred from North Carolina to Penn State, is now in Louisville. He could end up helping that secondary. I believe they got the two best players from Georgia State, a receiver and a defender. So he's come in, and I think he's made his mark in that sense by adding talent to the roster. And clearly whatever he's selling, people are buying. They're willing to come play for him. So if he can continue to do that, that will serve him well, because that is really the direction of the sport. The Louisville program as a whole, I think time and again has proven itself as one that wants to invest in football, wants to have a good football team.
Right.
Satterfield leaving and Brom stepping in, I think, is a big coaching upgrade. So the combination of what we saw, the limited track record we saw with Jeff Brom at Purdue, the fact that he has come over now to Louisville, a place, again, he's very familiar and has been able to recruit guys off of other teams to come and play for him. And I think the fact that the ACC, despite the fact, as you said, it is getting better, but it still is very gettable.
Sure.
Still is very, very gettable to me. All of that talent that's still on the roster, knowing that they were inconsistent last year, just feels like a good situation to me. And the schedule is nice this year. The schedule actually works to their favor in the short term. So I think when we did our initial schedule preview, the over-under might have been lower. It's now bumped up to 8.5. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's still 8.5, which is, that you're an 8 or a 9 win team by the measures of Vegas. It just seems to me like he steps into a really good situation. He's the type of guy who's probably going to be around a while as well, which is another thing that we could factor in. I'm a big time flex on. I actually thought about doing a literal flex here for the camera because of Louisville, because of how I feel about Louisville. I was not as gung ho on them as I feel I am starting to be the more I dig in. So I'm in.
All right, so you have the investment of Jeff Brom, obviously it being his hometown team. You have, I thought, some savvy hires on defense when he was at Purdue.
Yep.
Turned Aiden O'Connell into a full-on pretty good quarterback. I think he was a walk-on, right? Aiden O'Connell beat out Jack Plummer. You have recruiting to Purdue in an interesting way. Look at a couple of the receivers brought in. David Bell, most recently, star power receiver. I think he has a good eye for assistant coaches. And the defense was coming off a year last year. Again, this is short term. This doesn't mean that they're now an 8-9 win program or whatever, but I want to say the defense was like a top 20 points per drive defense.
Yep.
So underlying numbers say that they played hard, they made red zone stops, whatever. And so if we're going to say that Louisville will have more in the way of recruiting because of geography and because of history, recent history of success, more so than what Purdue has had. And we're going to say we've got a quarterback whisperer for a head coach, a topsy-turvy ACC, and an active portal structure, which is what Louisville has right now. It is a destination. I think feeling the flex is fine. That's a lot of Fs. That's a lot of alliteration. Feeling the flex is fine. So I don't have a case against it, more so just that it's a new situation for Jeff Brom, and I want to say the top of the ACC in adding Florida State now becomes a little bit more difficult, where it was just sort of Clemson and a mess of teams, Clemson.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I'm good with this. I'm good with the flex. I think there's more to like than not with this coaching change. So I have nothing to detract. We'll see whatever the future of the ACC holds in terms of teams coming and going, but I think Louisville's is pretty well positioned to win 8 or 9 games a year. Absolutely.
Yeah, big time flex for me on Louisville.
You can do it at Purdue.
Yeah.
You can do it other places. Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Where do you want to go next, Ty?
Let's go to Houston.
Okay.
Newcomer to the Big 12, over under 4.5. A head coach, and Dana Holgerson, who has played at very high levels before, so I don't think this is necessarily above him. But anytime you've got a new program stepping into a power conference, the red flags go up.
Sure.
The red flags go up. How will they assimilate? We don't even know what the Big 12 is going to look like 3 years from now. There's, I think, an ongoing conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
We know Texas and Oklahoma won't be there, which seemingly would bode well for schools like Houston or really any other school in the Big 12. But where are you at with the Cougs?
I think I'm buying low. With Houston.
I remember you. Oh, sexy.
Yeah.
You said 4.5 games. I think that's probably right, considering where they are right now. Now, the way that they can recruit in saying, come to a power conference and stay close to home if you're from East Texas, Southern Texas, whatever, South Texas. That's a big thing in terms of bringing a transfer back from farther away, right? If somebody from Texas ends up at Arkansas, if somebody at Texas ends from like the Houston area, whatever, ends up at LSU, ends up also close to East Texas, but ends up at Florida, whatever, because this is a hotly contested recruiting ground, and it doesn't work out, that there is a power program in their backyard, similar to what we've talked about with some of the Florida schools, that they're positioned well geographically for kids to come home. And so with Houston, we think we're going to continue to get good quarterback development. Donovan Smith is now there. We'll say, I think it's Donovan Smith and Lucas Coley, I want to say, are battling for the job. I don't know if anything has been announced as of 7-5, but the defense fully flopped last year, fell off a cliff after a really nice 2021. They return a bunch. They've added some in transfers. I just think because of how active Houston can be in the portal, with Dana Holgerson's experience at a more difficult place to recruit to at West Virginia, and how savvy he has been, that's my word of recently, savvy. Remember Tony Gibson?
Yep.
What did you call him? Crazy Carl Joseph in the back end there?
Crazy
for
Carl,
West Virginia, way back when. Because of that, with the mess that I think the Big 12, and I mean this actually in an endearing way, the Big 12 will be in the middle because I think the floor is pretty high. I think if there is going to be a team that emerges, that can attract a quarterback, that can find playmakers on defense, that doesn't have to wait 3 or 4 years to be good in that development cycle. If Houston can get back to the point, this is a monumental sized if, because when they got there with Tom Herman, they were pulling in big time recruits, keeping them home. Ed Oliver was the headliner there. So there has to be an element of that where we have to see in mid-December a headline of Dana Holgerson outfoxes Brian Kelly, something like that for a local recruit or 3 local recruits. I think I'm going to buy low because of the talent base, and I think they might only win 5 games this year. But long term, if there's a team well positioned to make that leap and separate itself from a middle of the pack, I think I'm going Houston. And now Dana Holgerson's a wild card. He'll throw in a 3-9 year.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to buy low based on quarterback and talent level.
What frightens me a little bit about Houston, and I understand moving into now a power conference over the long term, maybe they can adjust some of these offense defense skews that we look at.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe the access to the Power 5 gives them a greater access to talent. Obviously, they're in a very advantageous spot being so they're in Texas. But too much of Houston's recent profile has skewed in the direction of offense. It's been a typical Holgerson team, which is all offense.
Are you telling me that a team that lost a game 77-63 last year is perhaps a little bit too focused on offense?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm just saying. The skews, this is a half team. This is a big-time half team. And it's fine if you're having to outduel UTSA, or if you're having to outduel Memphis, or USF, or East Carolina. They kill it. Temple, right? Throw
Tulane,
Temple in there. It's fine if you have to outduel those teams. More often than not, I feel like with Houston's talent base, they're going to win those games. But if you're now suddenly getting into shootouts with Oklahoma State or shootouts with TCU or Baylor, those are just better teams. And I don't think you can rely on the offense to the same extent. You just can't. You're gonna have to build the defense. You're gonna have to find some way to make it a little bit more symmetrical on both sides of the ball. So, though I like the idea of Houston going into the Big 12, and I think it fits, and I think it's a program that's probably long overdue to be in a Power 5 conference, my inclination is to say flop for the short term.
By the way, last season, I look at the second order wins, as I know you do. They start out the season kind of catastrophically bad. They beat UTSA, which is always going to be, in hindsight, very impressive.
Sure.
They lose close to Tulane. They have the wild shootout against SMU. I don't believe their post-game win expectancy was below 50% after the first 3 games, which is both good and bad, right? They constantly put themselves in position to win because of the offense. And I think they had something like the 123rd 3-and-out percentage, something crazy. That if they could just get the hell off the field a little bit more, like you could see them jumping from whatever their 4.5 win, the over-under total, to like 9.5 in a season. Because when you do something exceptionally well and just do that other thing poorly and not catastrophically, disastrously, that's 2 adverbs, you are going to win 8+ games. And so I am hearing you, Ty. I'm validating your feelings. I'm really trying to be a supportive partner here, Ty. But, and you're totally right about, the difficulty being a step up from where they've been in the American. They were like 11 points from being 10-2 last year.
I get it. I'm just looking at the same spreadsheet as you, and their defensive performance relative to projections.
Yeah.
On only 4 instances last year, did the defense actually exceed expectations? Right. And that's generally not a sustainable model.
It's not.
Especially going against better teams. But I hear you. Let's move on. We got to move on. We've got a couple more teams to get through here. So far in the can, we've got Wake, we've got Wazoo, we've got Louisville, and now we've got Houston. Let me close out my run of ACC teams talking about the Syracuse Orange.
Okay.
Syracuse is 6.5 over under. Long term, I'm a flop on Cuse.
Okay.
Short term, it's.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It's a great sound.
Short term, maybe a hold, quasi flex, like a half flex. I think Dino Babers is good enough to deal a winning season when he's got an above average quarterback.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, long term, it's a flop for me because I'm not confident he can continually get that above average quarterback in a sustainable way. And by that, I mean, I'm not sure he can recruit one in a consistent, ongoing way. He hasn't proven yet that he can do that. I'm not sure that he can go out in the portal and get one in a consistent, sustainable way. That's hard to do. It doesn't matter who your coach is.
Sure.
It's just hard to find those guys year in and year out. So for that reason, that kind of skis me out a little bit.
I like your Shark Tank verbiage though. For that reason.
Yeah, I still got it in my head. Short term though, I think this season could be fun for Syracuse.
Okay.
I think it could be fun. I think it's going to be a lot of Garrett Shredder, if we want to go back to our old nomenclature. A lot of Garrett Shredder to Aronde Getz in the second. Syracuse was something like 4-0 last year in games where Gaston caught more than 100 receiving yards. He's a very, very good player. And the defense also has a fair amount of experience returning. The schedule is tough in the middle, but by and large seems workable enough to get to 7 or 8 wins. See, I don't think they'll get to 8, but I could easily see them getting to 7. Probably would not touch the over-under just because it seems like 6.5 is the right number. But I feel okay about Syracuse getting to a bowl game. That seems like that will happen to me. It's really just a question of if Dino does not find his quarterback, either in the transfer portal or in the recruiting game, how are they going to bolt this thing together? Right. Because we've seen what happens when he doesn't. And I'm just not confident in his ability to kind of do that time and time and time again. So for these reasons, Dan, I'm a flop. I'm a flop.
I'm with you. I think Syracuse is a program that's well positioned, and I love to refer to this. The 5-finger death punch from Kill Bill, if you remember. Spoiler alert, there's a 5-finger death punch. And to me, that is Syracuse can win a bunch of games when these 5 programs are horrendous, right? They are a beneficiary of ACC-flation. And so when that doesn't happen, I think they settle back to the mean, which to me is 5 or 6 wins. Because I think Dino Babers is a pretty good coach, but they lose Tony White, who's been pretty great for them on defense. He goes to Nebraska. They were, forget being a tale of like two sides of the ball. They were a tale of two defenses. They were incredible at stopping big plays last year and awful against the run. You could do anything you wanted within like a 15-yard zone of Syracuse last season. And so they're a team built in a very specific way. They lose, 5 of 6 to finish the season last year when teams realized they could just run directly at them up the gut. And so I hesitate with a program like that has cycled through offensive coordinators, now is making a change at defensive coordinator, even though philosophically they're in a similar place. I have to buy into something specifically about your program and its ability to win those close games. And they won them early, and then we're scoring how many did they score against Pittsburgh and Florida? I don't know, what was it?
9
Pittsburgh?
points.
It was 9 points against Pittsburgh. Who'd they score 3 against last year?
Florida State. They lost 38-3.
That's inexcusable. Florida State was a good team. You can't score 3 points. So that, and despite whatever injury situations, whatever, I think I'm in on Syracuse as a bowl team, but not consistently having a 7-win floor. Too much just needs to go wrong around them for them to take advantage, for me to feel like independently Syracuse is a pretty good program.
Yeah. And it pains me to say that because I really like Dino Babers.
Sure.
I really like Dino Babers as a coach. And I think he's a sharp guy. He's been able to coach offense at a really high level for a long time. But it's just the tools with which he is working limit his ability to perform better. And, maybe I do think Syracuse will be better this season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the reason why I'm encouraged to watch them this year. I do feel like they're going to improve on defense. I do feel like at least that tandem between Garrett Schrader and Rondé Gatson will be fun to watch. But they lose Sean Tucker. I think they lose both starting tackles along that offensive line. So that makes it tricky. There's enough there to be good, enough there to be competitive, certainly enough there to make a bowl game, maybe make a run at 7 or 8 wins. But longer term, it's just, again, we want to talk about Wazoo maybe getting squeezed out of this new reality of college football. Syracuse is not unlike Wazoo in that sense, where it's just one of those teams that does not necessarily have the pull of some of the bigger name brand schools.
Well, they have
that are in the same
basketball.
conference.
They, as an athletic department, right?
Sure. I mean,
school,
there's a lot going on there. And there's, I think, a pretty good tradition just athletically, but it's hard. It's going to be hard to compete. So I'm a flop.
I'm a flex on the Syracuse experience because on
too.
any given Syracuse game, you can tune in for 2.5 quarters and think to yourself, boy, are they difficult. Yeah. Boy, do they have it all figured out. Boy, is that defense tricky. Boy, is there some interesting speed on offense. And then for another quarter and a half, depending on where it falls in the game, you almost feel as if the other coach is staring at Dino Babers' NES controller and seeing every single play. It's like, being up, A into the left. All righty. And that's the Syracuse experience, for better or worse. And I guess Mike Norvell had very keen eyes on Dino Babers' fingers. I don't know why we went down this road, but that's the Syracuse experience. And I need to believe in something more than 2.5 juicy quarters to buy into you as a 7+, 8+ win program more often than not.
Let's close things out with Kentucky, Dan.
Yeah, man. I'm a flex.
I remember you. Oh, sexy.
Oh, sexy. Why is Kentucky sexy?
I just think there's too much to like. I think there's too much even though if you go back to the exact year where Kentucky under Mark Stoops started looking like what they look like now, they just win 7 games a year. So it's a hard regular season game. I think they've gone 7-5 more often than they have any other record. And they'll have their upswing when everything's going right and you make a great hire in Liam Cohen, who is back, and everything checks out for Kentucky, be it in the portal and bringing in a game changer like Wan'Dale Robinson, who you'll forever be in love with.
Love Wan'Dale.
Or having game changers on defense. Now, here's the thing. I think with the combination of where they are at receiver right now, which is very good, where they're at quarterback, depending on Devin Leary's health, should be very good. Liam Cohen, in his very short stint, was very good. I worry about the offensive line, which was nightmarish bad last year. And not because I think, last year is everything, but just because if I were to tell you Notre Dame has a bunch of pretty shaky issues at offensive line. I don't think you would be super confident in them fixing that overnight, right? No. Like they had issues, 2-3 years ago, and it took them a minute, okay? It takes time to gel. Now, Kentucky's hitting the portal hard. We'll see if it improves, but with talent last year on offense, Will Levis was constantly under fire. They couldn't really do anything consistently on the ground, especially even when Chris Rodriguez came back. And so that to me is the concern, that you can have a lot figured out. And if I use the phrase, man, that offensive line is kind of turnstile-y, there's just not much you can do to look consistently good as a team if the offensive line isn't there. So that's a we'll see on that. But Mark Stoops as a recruiter, Mark Stoops as somebody who can pull out some close games. I mean, we saw last year with Mizzou. And we did lose a close game to Vanderbilt. Let's be honest. There's a lot to like and not like about where they were last year. But if you're giving me the option, even in the SEC East, to say, do you think in the next 5 years Kentucky will win 8 games more than 7? I'm going to say flex. I'm going to say flex because of what I think the talent level is. It's a good division right now just because of, and however long we're playing division football in the SEC. But if we're looking at Kentucky as a team that has to play a lot of the same teams that they've been playing, I think they're in a decent spot. I really do. I think they're well coached. I think Mark Stoops is in a good spot professionally where he doesn't have to win 10 games and worry about getting fired. So I think there's a certain amount of inner peace that probably exists along that coaching staff. Obviously, Brad White is probably one of the best 15 defensive coordinators in the country, something like that. And so short of where they were last year, with everything going wrong on offense, it seemed at times, I think they're in a good place. If I'm gonna wager on one side of this, Kentucky backsliding to like a 5-6 win program, I don't see it. I just don't. So I'm going with the flex here.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to the schedule preview, we both were encouraged by the fact that this is a slate in 2023.
Scheduled nobody. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're encouraged by the early slate. If you're trying to break in a new quarterback or anything new for that matter, Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, and Akron, followed by Vandy, it's a pretty good way to do it the first 4 weeks of the season.
Definitely. And they plucked Vandy's running back, Ray Davis.
They took Vandy's running back. So in all likelihood, that's a 4-0 start. And then you start counting beyond that, and it's like, okay, you can easily get to 6 wins.
Right.
You can get to 7 wins on this schedule. Longer term, I think I'm a flex. I might not be as hard of a flex as you are on Kentucky because
that's fine.
How the introduction of Texas and Oklahoma factors in to kind of the longer term picture of the SEC, that to me remains a little bit murky. What kind of an impact that has on a school like a Kentucky? Presumably everybody gets more money. That won't hurt, but will that make it harder for Kentucky to get talent and not somebody else? I don't know. But for the short term, yeah. For the short term, I love Liam Cohn coming back. I love Devin Leary. I was crazy about Devin Leary. I wanted him to go to Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. So I think for the short term, I again feel pretty good about their chances here, certainly in September. And I love the coaching situation. The coaching situation is very stable. You got to like that. So I think generally I'm with you, but as the conference expands next year, as there's more of an emphasis on getting to the playoff, maybe not as much winning the conference, but getting to that 16-team playoff, I'm a little bit fearful that it's going to make coaches who can't get there lose their minds. Because that will, of course, be the measuring stick. But
yeah, I think
generally
I'm
with you.
I think Kentucky has a good shot to be Utah light, that there are always going to be programs that are reeling or dealing with injuries or just don't have their act together. And Kentucky has the ceiling of an SEC program that basically beats them all, beats all of those clearly flawed teams. My concern is I think Kentucky is also one of those programs that needs to have a schedule filled with home wins. And to me, that was last year's schedule. Last year was an unbelievable opportunity to get to 9 wins. Given what the schedule looked like, given what they returned, given what the best of the defense looked like, and that they weren't able to take advantage. And look, Will Levis is beat up. Obviously, they didn't have the answer at offensive coordinator. Obviously, the line wasn't there. But if we're talking about a flex team, the Hey Sexy team, the Hey Sexy team needs to be the one that beats Vanderbilt, right? The Hey Sexy team needs to be the one that has it lined up so those winnable games come at home and they win those games. So I think they had South Carolina and Lexington last year when South Carolina was a little bit topsy-turvy and lost that game. I don't know if you're looking at the schedule right now. But that to me with Kentucky is they weren't able to do it last year when the pitch was coming in looking like a watermelon. That's the concern to me. Gave up a ton to, I think, Quinshon Judkins, like a huge, big, game-changing long touchdown run that on the margins, they needed that crazy lucky ending against Mizzou, and that's just to get to 7-5.
No.
That's what gives me floppy concern, and I stand by that sentence.
Floppy concern. Why don't we close out on that note? Write in solidverbal@gmail.com or hit us up on social media. Let us know what we got right, what we got wrong. The 6-pack of teams here, we had 3 from the ACC again, Wake Forest, Louisville, and Syracuse.
Yeah.
And then we had 3 from other conferences. We had Wazoo, we had Houston, closing things out with Kentucky. Going out to verballers.com. That is, of course, our Patreon, where I re-emphasize we're going to be ramping things up here in a matter of days. So make sure you stop on over and get familiar with that website. We would encourage you to join now, be a certified or premium Verballer, because we've got a lot of fun and exciting things coming to that channel. Also, make sure you follow along on social media and hit subscribe over on YouTube, where we post all of our full episodes if you want to watch us. No flexes here in front of the cameras.
Yeah.
But we are 2 humble podcasters. It's not really what we do here, Dave.
Can I close out with a series of very short, quick questions about your pool experience?
My pool experience?
Your flex and flop experience. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you say you're a confident pool goer?
Yeah.
Not swimmer. That like shirt comes off, very social. Like, do you find yourself to be at home poolside or in the pool?
I love pools.
Same.
I'm not gonna act like I'm the first guy to take the shirt off, but I'm not embarrassed about taking off the shirt and getting some rays. I'm okay with that.
Of course.
I feel okay.
But you say that as like you're an in shape guy. You've always been an in shape guy.
I'm in shape. I'm not jacked. I'm not cut.
Of course not.
I'm a podcaster.
I'm a podcaster. Yeah.
You kind of know where I stand in the pecking order, but I'm okay.
Now, will you? So there's a few different types of pool goers. You can just lounge. You can lounge, quick dip, re-lounge, or you can be like the life of the pool party in there with like a football or a beach ball, doing cannonballs, doing laps, having a great time, swim up bar if you're at like a hotel.
Yeah.
Are you that type of guy that you find yourself, I apologize for the phrasing, are you finding yourself wet more often than not?
I am. Yeah.
Great. Same page.
Yep.
I don't understand the sitting on the side of the pool. I love a good poolside nap or, chicken fingers or something, but you give me a pool, I'm jumping in at earliest possible moment.
Yeah. No, if you've got the swim up bar, that's paradise. The swim up bar is paradise. But if there's a football or some sort of game to be played in the pool,
it's the best.
I've never not been part of that game. Never.
What do you think is still in your doable repertoire? Obviously a cannonball.
Yeah.
Once a cannonballer, always a cannonballer.
Definitely do the cannonball. Yep.
You still confident in your diving ability?
No.
Really?
No.
Why not?
I've never been that confident in my diving ability.
Like,
not much.
Just not even off a board. I'm just saying right off the edge of the pool.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I'm not being judged for the level of splash, I can dive in.
But it's clearly, if I were to put a camera on you, the people watching wouldn't interpret that as like a semi-flop. It's clearly a dive in. I mean, is it a semi-flop?
I'm a little concerned it would come across as a semi-flop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you do a handstand with no warning, you think? Bottom of the pool?
I could, but I wouldn't want to because I get water in my ears. That's a pain in the ass.
No, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah.
Could you do a somersault into the pool? Off a board or off the edge? Not a full flip, but you know what I'm talking about. Like you do the full rotation.
Yeah, I could do that.
That's I think you don't lose that. I think you can hold on to that.
I think that's pretty straightforward.
Did you ever go to like a camp or like a school day thing with a pool? I don't know how it works on the East Coast. We had that on the West Coast. I don't know if you ever like went in an outdoor pool as part of like school PE, but we did. What was your stance on the high dive? Avoid at all costs? Comfortable? and somewhere in between.
Was not crazy about the high dive.
Hated it. Ty.
Was not crazy about the high dive because then we start talking about flop territory.
Of course.
And inadvertent flops are very much a thing.
Definitely on the table.
So no, not much of a high dive guy.
Okay.
No.
All right. This is all good to know. This is all I got to get to a pool with the Verballer pool party behind the scenes, Ty. I think I'm pretty aligned with you. I think I'm confident in my diving ability. Were you ever like a swimmer, like competitively?
Not competitively, just sort of like poolside swimming races. I'm the type of person that thinks he's a faster swimmer than he actually is. Oh my God.
It's the worst feeling.
Yeah.
When you swim up against somebody who's an actual swimmer and you are ledecked immediately.
No, I feel like I'm a much stronger swimmer than I actually am.
Okay.
And then I actually race somebody who is, better at it, and I get dusted.
The only thing I have to add to this, Ty, because we're pretty aligned here, is I still believe, not Olympic size pool, a standard swimming pool length. I still believe that if and when I swim the length of that pool fully underwater on one breath, that when I come up, people are going to be astonished.
Yeah.
What an athlete this guy must be. The whole pool? And nobody ever is. Nobody but I still do it. I still do it to test myself.
Let me close out with this. Have you ever attempted the sort of kick flip?
Oh, you attempted poorly once. You stop attempting. Yeah. Yeah. You get water everywhere. Yeah.
You get down the other end of the pool and try to, no.
Not for me.
No,
not for me. I tried swimming. I went into like an Olympic-sized pool, like a community pool last summer. I was like, everybody says this is a great workout. I'm going to do this. This is going to be my workout for the day. And I think I went 4 lengths. So that's back, forth. And I think I needed like Olympic level oxygen treatment. Like, I think I was like, of course, like 8-year-old girls are swimming back and forth twice as fast, doing 40 times as many laps as I did. I think I was like staggering up the ladder like the triathlete in the Gatorade commercial, where I'm just like, ah! Ah! 4 lengths, Ty. 4 lengths is what I had. There is nothing more humanizing than being an out-of-shape swimmer. Immediately. It was older people just lapping me constantly.
The dude with like the $500 goggles and the swim cap just
oh my God.
mowing you down.
I don't even think my legs stayed atop the water. I think they got so heavy that I was just like half doggy paddling as I was. Yeah. Real humbling experience, Ty. If you haven't done it in a while, see where you're at. It's not great.
Let us know your swimming aptitude in the YouTube comments. We'd love to hear from one and all. We'll be back next week. As I said, exciting things to come over on the Patreon at verballers.com. Exciting previews to come as we round the corner into the official preseason with the 2023 college football season getting awfully big in the window. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you hit subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, thanks for downloading. Thanks for supporting. We'll talk to you all next week. Stay solid.
Peace.
I remember you. Oh, sexy.